Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeau. We are the founders of Lumia.
And we're super passionate about all things coaching, and we want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training thousands of life coaches.
Let's dive into the science and magic of coaching.
On today's episode, what happens when coaches give advice? This is a very, very common topic. Noelle.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. I also feel like this is a topic that is one of the things that people's minds are just blown when they come into coach training, because there's this idea, there's a mystique that coaches are these sage people who give advice. I'm a coach, you're a coach. What say you about this?
Well, it makes sense because usually giving really good advice is what got us here, meaning people around us have told us that you're really good at giving advice or helping people, and then suddenly we're now pursuing coaching and we think giving advice is how to do it because that's what we've been doing.
Absolutely. And it's, I love you and I love me. And also, I don't know that I want to be giving anybody advice anymore, ever. It's, the art and science of coaching, the way that it's supposed to work, is so much more interesting. And it creates so much more space than exploration. If you think about what advice does, if someone has an issue and they get an answer thrown at them kind of like a slingshot, it really shuts down all possible exploration. And coaching is actually based on the idea of, well, what happens when we ask questions? And there's this really beautiful concept that the art of a question, the act of asking a question itself, creates space for a solution to be found.
Yes, I think advice, even if it's amazing advice, and a lot of people are really good at giving advice, but just in general, I think advice makes things narrow because the advice is coming from one person, your set of lenses, your story and all that. And then when you ask questions, it becomes wide. And so in that expansion, there is more room for answers, for insight, for revelations, and a lot of stuff to happen.
Absolutely. And there's another layer to it that is not easily visible, but I think is really important to unpack. And that's the role of power dynamics in coaching, and the idea of what it means when you're a client, when you give up control over your own life to someone who's going to tell you what to do. And we've all been there in a position where we literally just want anyone, just tell me what to do, make my decision for me, because that feels so nice and comforting.
Yeah.
But it actually does you a disservice. And then as a coach, it's not equitable to be passing information to a client as if you are an expert in their life. And what coaching is truly is a strategic partnership between two people where coach and client examine the issue co-equally and each give their perspective. Well, what do you see? Well, what do you see? And so we want to be aware that we don't want to dismantle this strategic partnership and disrupt what should be a very equal exchange.
Yeah. I love what you said about the dynamic of the relationship, because if you are someone who is always giving advice, you are now kind of coming at your client, or more acting like some kind of professor, maybe standing behind the podium, feeling the most powerful relationships are usually when you're coming with your client. And also, as a coach, if you think that you're supposed to have all the answers, it's not sustainable, because the pressure of that is going to sink you.
Absolutely. And that's where your skill as a coach comes into play. I was talking with a student who had just joined our program, and he said, well, what happens when you run out of questions as a coach? And I said, well, you ask your client, what else is there to know? As there's always more. The forest of the interior of people are so deep. There's always more terrain to explore when we're getting into the human psyche. Something I think it's important to touch on here is that just because we're saying as a coach, you don't want to give advice, you want to create a co-equal partnership with your client. That doesn't mean that as a coach, you're not invited to the party to share your observations. Not
Mhm.
at all. If we're actually thinking about what a strategic partnership is and why it's valuable, it's in the diversity of ideas. And there are so many different ways that as a coach you can bring your ideas to the table. I think brainstorming is a
Mm.
really great example of that. What have you experienced in your sessions with clients when you have partnered to kind of figure out something?
The word collaboration, I
Mhm.
give a lot of homework, when I'm coaching, and, the homework isn't something that I pass out. I can suggest, but usually it's, "What do you think the homework should be? Let's talk about this together." And so when you're collaborating, you're actually empowering your client to, um, make her own decisions and create, solutions herself instead of, taking something from you.
Yes, 100%, and that's one of the benefits of the coaching process is that over time, your client begins to get in touch with their own capacity for decision making, right? And when as a coach, we're constantly inviting our client to the conversation to share their view, asking our client, "Well, what did you think about what I just shared?" Or, "Well, what would you do in this situation?" Or, "What do you see in this situation?" The client is gaining a repeated experience that their voice is valid,
Not
and
only
that
that, but, you're getting them to not see you anymore. That's the goal, right? The getting them to
yeah,
learn how to, make decisions and sort things out on giving them tools.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I think too, when coach and client can get to a place where both are sharing their own experience in the session, their own
Mhm.
intuition in the session. And that's something that comes with coaching mastery that young coaches might be hesitant to do. But have you ever been talking with somebody in session and you've gotten tingles?
Tingle. Describe the tingles, where they're coming from.
Like,
Like chills because there's magic happening?
yeah, chills because there's magic
Yeah.
happening or, someone says something and you just have this, like, feeling like,
Yes.
"Yes,"
Yes.
"Finally, yes." Or, "No, bad idea, no,"
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
like your body reacts.
They usually happen for me after the session. Usually after the
Really?
session, I get, quote unquote tingles. I also have a lot of revelations about myself. I take away a lot of things from the session. But yeah, usually after the session, I get a feeling of how it went, especially running a group session. Those are the ones that are really powerful for me.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I tend to have a lot of physical experiences in session. And
Mm.
as I was going through advanced coach training, something that was really surprising to me is that the emotions and physical sensations that we experience as a coach are part of the information that we should share with our clients.
Mm.
I was having a session yesterday where my client was explaining what they were experiencing early on in dating someone.
Mhm.
And as my client was describing the situation, I just got this like gross sick feeling and I was like, "Oh, this feels like a red flag." And as my client went on with the story, they ended up, ending the relationship and I said, "I have to tell you that as you were really telling me what was going on, I didn't feel good. Like that was
Mm.
a real red flag for me." And that was an
Mhm.
opening in the conversation to talk with my client about, well, what does a red flag look like? Why did I have that physiological response? What were the physiological responses that the client was having? And it led to this,
Mhm.
whole world of exploration because I had shared my experience versus saying, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to point out is, no, you're not supposed to give advice, but you can share your experience. It's what makes you human. That kind of shared experience produces this kind of trust, this kind of glue. It makes the relationship real, and so that's one thing you can do. And I think that's something that people should be aware of. Is that in coaching, even you being transparent, and saying, "Hey, I feel something kind of strange, or I feel yucky. There's something going on." No, that's not advice, but that's a great way to um, guide, to start a conversation, to connect, to all of those things. So you
All
can
of
do
those
that for
things.
sure. Yeah.
100%. And alongside of the fact that we're helping our clients get in touch with their own capacity to be the directors of their own life, to make the
Hmm.
decisions, to answer the questions, we're also helping our clients get in touch with how to evaluate the world around them. And when we give advice and we don't drill down on our sensory capacity in a session, that's when we get really we miss so much with our clients, in partnership with our clients, about what's possible. So even just getting into, like, so I have a couple different sets of data to think about, and I'll give you a preview and then we can touch on them. So the first one is environmental data,
Mm.
like what's in somebody's environment. Another one is relational data, looking at specific relationships. A third area is looking at the difference between feelings and facts. And finally, there's, intuition. So
Hmm.
as we're kind of breaking this down and saying, okay, well, how are all of the different ways that a coach can help a client get in touch with looking at their own capacity? When we think about their environment, so I'm in Philadelphia, you're in California.
Hmm.
I have no idea what's going on outside your garage. If I
Hmm.
were doing a session with you right now, all I would be able to figure out is exactly what's in front of me, but
Hmm.
you have access to the world behind the camera. I don't know if there are still chickens. I don't know if there are still
Right.
parrots. I don't know, Logan is growing so much every day. Is she riding a motorcycle yet? Like, these are all the things that I can't access. And so I have to rely on you through questions to say, well, what's in our environment? And then beyond that, what are your physical sensations
Hmm.
within this environment? How do you
Hmm.
feel when you leave your garage and walk into your kitchen? And these are only the things the client can answer. And if we don't take the time to kind of delve through and ask those questions, we miss out on a huge amount of data.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you're saying. So, if you're not asking questions, you're probably defaulting to speculation, to assumptions. You're not getting enough data. Yeah.
100%. And
Yeah.
there's a really fun one I wanted to bring up, because you and I both do work as coaches in the realm of relationships. And I don't know if you've ever gotten into this one. So we know that smell is a really powerful player in the world of, like, pheromones and datings and
Mm.
relationships. Have you ever asked
Mhm.
one of your clients, like, what they smell when they're with
No,
someone?
that's a really interesting question. I love that. No, I don't think I've ever. And
Uh,
what does that smell mean? What does that smell remind you of? How does that, yeah, what's the feeling
Yeah.
from that
Do
smell,
you
right?
like the way your partner smells? Is
Mm,
like a basic, question, because we know
yeah.
that typically when people are a good pheromone match, like, there's something in there with that smell.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that itself can be a whole session.
It really could be,
Yeah.
along with sound, tonality. So, sometimes the
Mhm.
tone of people's voices
Voices,
really
yeah,
rubs people
yeah,
the wrong way, and
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and so that's something to explore with your clients, but that's the only they could bring that sensory information. We would
Mhm,
never be able to access it as coaches. Colors, sound, tone, touch, like, like, how does that go? And so, just
mhm.
kind of taking that sensory aspect, there's so much work that we can do.
Yeah, I love that. More and more information.
Yeah. And then looking at, okay, so that's environment. And then relational, is the characteristics of a relationship. And is this relationship adding to or detracting from the quality of life? This can be a friendship. This can be a
Mm,
partnership. This can be a romantic
mhm,
partnership. This can be a business partnership. This can be, anything, right? Um, if we're giving advice around relational data, this is one of the areas as a coach where you have to be really careful because it's impossible for you to say, this is how you should think, feel, or experience your
Right.
relational life without being biased. Immediately, your own biases are going to come
Yeah.
into play as a
Yeah.
coach because you have your own map of the world.
Yeah, you gotta ask the client, "What is this relationship like? Is it lopsided? How does it make you feel? Why is it important?" All of that. You can't these aren't questions that you could even ask you can that you can answer yourself in any
No,
way. Yeah.
no, you never could.
Yeah.
And this is another place where we have to ask a lot of questions to determine if our clients have any bias.
Mhm.
Something that comes up for helping practitioners, all the time, whether it's a client or a coach or a therapist or whatever, the gamut of helping professionals is in our society. Most people, unless they've actually done a lot of work to overcome it, have a bias preference towards men over women.
Mhm.
And this happens often in coaching and relational settings where there's this unconscious bias. Well, shouldn't the preference be given to the man? Or
Mhm.
shouldn't isn't it better to have X currency in your life? And so that's something I wanted to call out as like a really common bias set that comes
Yeah.
through, and
Yeah.
for folks to think about it and evaluate it. Have you ever experienced that or
I could see that.
noticed
I
it?
mean, obviously, the word patriarchy comes to mind. Also, depending on how you grew up, who was the one that was barking orders? Maybe it was dad, the leader, school. So, like, almost like this underlying programming that your coach should be a man or a male coach will be better or no more. You may
Mhm.
not even be aware of that. I do think things are changing, of course, which is a good thing. I also think with women coaches, if you are a woman going through certain things, the man's just not going to, they can empathize, but they're not going to relate. You're going to relate more to, and maybe it's not even a gender thing. You're going to relate to someone who has some kind of overlap with your story. You know,
I
I get a lot of
agree.
people that come to me because I'm Asian American or because I'm Korean. And so yeah.
Yeah, and I think, kind of what you're peeling back is that's why coaches ask questions. Is because
Yeah.
if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, "Wow, the difference between us doesn't allow me to empathize or understand your
Hmm.
experience
Hmm.
fully. I really need to ask questions to get in there because I can't possibly understand how you make meaning of the world given your experience."
A lot of I ran a men's retreat a while ago, and for men, um, them sitting in front of another man is very powerful because they're
Mhm.
almost not even used to that unless it's in the setting of competition or work or so like just to be vulnerable in front of another man, um, that can be the prescription. So
Yeah, it
yeah.
can be, and that can also be really scary, I
Yeah.
imagine, too.
Yeah.
I saw, something the other day to the effect that, most men are only given flowers at their funerals,
Yeah. That's true.
a
Right.
and I just made a note to myself to start giving all of the men in my life
Mm,
flowers because they deserve it, and, and that type of thing where, you know, as as a woman socialized to understand, patriarchal society is a negative, I really need to work on turning my empathy cord when I work with clients who identify as men to be like,
mhm,
well, how does that feel for you to
mm,
be in that position? What are the deficits it creates for you, emotionally? And I can't and I have this bias where I just assume men are fine. And
yeah,
that's not the case at
yeah,
all,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and also as a man, accepting flowers, that could be a challenge, you
Yeah.
know, because, it's gonna say something about you if so yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into feelings versus facts. This is
Mhm.
something that we
Big
talk
one.
about often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as coaches, sometimes we're listening to someone and we see the picture and we see the strategy and we're like, oh, here's what you should do, right? But number one, that's not necessarily true. You can't say that. And number two, but your client is having all of these feelings. And
Hmm.
so they might not be able to see the facts. And even if you shared your strategic plan, like you still have to get through, well, is this feeling telling you the truth or not? How do you deal with that as a coach?
Well, I think helping the client first and foremost, separating, sorting out what is a feeling and what is actual factual. Of course, that could be a very blurry line. And because we feel something, we feel like it's true when that is not the case. And suddenly we're living in a lot of distorted thought. And I think that's when we really fall into that slippery well, and we
Yeah.
can't get out of our heads. And then it contributes to worse feelings and then worse thoughts in this cycle.
So here's where I want to go with this one because I don't have an answer. And I thought between the two of us, we might be able to figure it out. Is okay. So we know that feelings aren't facts. We know that
Mhm.
oftentimes our feelings based on memory will lead us to develop a view of the world that's not necessarily authentic or in our interest or real. Like if
Mhm.
you it's like me being able to do box jumps, right? Like I'm perfectly capable of it, but I'm
Yeah.
scared when I
Yeah.
stand in front of that box that I can't do it,
Sure.
that I'm going to fall, whatever. And so my feeling prevents me from actually taking action.
Right.
What's the difference between that and intuition? And how do we know and how can we tell?
Mm. I think the difference between what's the difference between feelings versus facts, or feeling what fear, and then the difference between that and intuition?
Yeah, your intuition, where because there have been times when I'll have like a genuine sense of knowing about a
Yeah.
situation.
I think intuition, with that, there's a layer of something greater than you. I think
Yeah.
intuition, there's something greater than this kind of current fear that you're feeling. There's a knowing, and there's a power in that knowing. Instead of, for using the box jump example, that's just a very kind of logical fear. You're feared. You're scared you're going to fall off the box or get hurt. That's not like a. It's not. It's. I think it's like a two-dimensional fear, not like a some kind of greater than you intuitive fear. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that when we're looking at feelings and facts, like there's logic to a feeling sequence. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you've lost something of value to you, you'll feel sad. If you
Mm-hmm.
think you're going to fall, you'll feel fear. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes with intuition, there isn't a logic sequence attached. There's no
Right.
reason why you would say to yourself, I shouldn't turn left today. I should go right,
Right.
and then you avoid, an accident. And that I think is a really important thing for coaches to be able to drill down on and be aware of, that we really need to get in there and listen to the client and from a multidimensional perspective to say, well, where is this coming from? Is this a sense of knowing? Is this a
Mm.
logical feeling sequence? Are there facts that we want to evaluate so that you can kind of swim through it?
Yeah, and a good place to start is patterns.
Yeah.
What are the patterns in the client's story? When has a client felt something that was intuitive, and that was the right call? How many times, or when has it just been distorted thinking, or uh, feeling something and believing something's true because of how she feels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Beautiful. Well, this was an awesome conversation.
Yes.
And I hope anyone out there listening today learned something and will, even in your personal life, step
Yeah.
away from giving advice because questions and exploration is so much more powerful.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Even if you're not a coach, just in your personal life with your friends, family, with yourself, when you're having conversations with yourself, instead of telling yourself what to do, ask yourself questions. Create more of a wider landscape, so things that you didn't even think about can appear, and you'll have more insight and revelations. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Take care.
Be well. Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to lumiacoaching.com/everything. Explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose and a bold community to do it with.
Lumia is ready to equip you with the tools, training, and community you will need to reach your goals. If you're ready to build a unique coaching business on your own terms while making an impact on the world at large, Lumia is the next bold step in your coaching journey. That's lumiacoaching.com/everything.
And hey, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it.